Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. And welcome back. I am here in Atlanta, Georgia with Camelia Mayfield. Camelia, thanks for joining in today.
Of course.
Well, awesome. So we are here for the Olympic trials, and it's super exciting to have you on here. So first question, who is Camelia?
Let's see. I'm an ultra runner, social worker. I recently graduated with my master's in social work, so kind of budding in that career a little bit, as well as with ultra marathoning. It has kind of taken few years to really get into it, but I'd say over the last year it's taken a pretty big chunk of my life and become pretty important to me.
And you're up in the Pacific Northwest where the trails are beautiful and often wet, right?
Actually, I live in Bend, Oregon, so we're technically high desert.
Got it.
And especially this winter, it's been pretty dry.
Cool. Yeah. So social work and ultra running. It seems that there's an interesting connection there. So let's first start with the running. So how did you get into running? My dad, growing up, he was an ultra runner. So as long as I can remember, we were going to different trail events, going to races, usually camping and being kind of his crew. And then along with that, growing up, my grandma was into road marathons on my mom's side. So kind of both sides of the family. It's like normal.
Yeah. And so, kind of middle school, just started off like doing the whole middle school track cross country thing, and continued through high school and college. Awesome.
And so a lot of people will, seem to start at shorter distances and they build up to longer distances. And so you've gone short all the way up to some super long stuff. So where is your sort of happy place? What's the distance that you just love?
I will say I really love 100Ks. I actually haven't done that many. But that's when a 100-mile race starts getting really hard. So I've had a lot of success in 100-mile races. And that being said, I wish I could quit at 62 miles for most of those.
Just
races.
Roll into Forest Hill and say, "All right, cool. Who's got a beer for me here?"
Yeah, that's a good 100K.
It's not bad. So you raced Western States. You're doing the Olympic trials. That's a lot of really awesome high level running. So what are some of the takeaways that you have from the trails that you'll be taking to the roads?
I think the biggest thing for Atlanta is just about trust the terrain and don't kind of discount that it's going to be hard. You go into a trail race knowing it's going to be hard,
right?
Just because of the distance and the terrain and some of the really remote areas. I think this being a loop course is going to be really difficult in its own way.
You know what's coming.
Yeah, you know what's coming, and it's not going to get easier
right.
each loop. So trusting that the hills are going to be hard no matter what, and a race is a race.
So, why'd you decide to do the trials?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess when I met the qualifier, I'm like, well, of course you have to do it if you're in.
Right.
I know not everyone, I guess, feels that way, but for me, it's just a bucket list item and something that I kind of had on my radar for a long time and wasn't really sure that I ever would get that qualifier. Mm-hmm. And so, it's the carpe diem. Who knows if I could get it 4 years from now, right. And it's time to do it.
Cool. How does the road marathon fit into the training for the rest of the year?
It's kind of sandwiched really well. I did Javelina 100 in the end of October, which is a relatively flat 100-mile course.
100-mile party.
Yeah.
It's a really fun one. And so I did a lot of kind of road workouts leading up to Javelina, or at least flatter trail workouts. So then transitioning to this marathon was basically a matter of just recovering and kind of fine tuning the speed. And then kind of same with Western States. It's a really rolling course. It doesn't have an insane amount of vertical. So any amount of aerobic fitness is going to translate well to trails.
Definitely. My coach, David Roche, loves the approach of just training to get fit versus being race specific.
Exactly.
So a lot of road speed benefits anywhere, really.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about on the start line, or what will you be thinking about on the start line tomorrow morning? Or tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah, I guess it is. It'll still be morning West Coast time. So
that's not bad, yeah.
I'm just going to be thinking about how grateful I am to be on the start line. I know that I'm probably going to cry when they do the national anthem, because I always do at big events. Just knowing that like I'm surrounded by almost 500 of like women who are just amazing. So I definitely think it's going to be a good representation of America's talent.
Is gratitude something that you intentionally practice?
No.
It just comes up?
I should.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that with my job, I see a lot of people who are in a lot of pain emotionally, and it's something that it makes me realize like how many like coping skills and how much gratitude I really do have. Maybe I don't realize I practice it, but just getting out the door, getting out for a run and kind of practicing that mindfulness definitely factors into my day.
Cool. Let's talk about the job for a sec, or for a few minutes. The topic of mental health is something that I'm pretty passionate about and love to talk about on the podcast and on Instagram and social media in general. How did you decide that that's what you wanted to do as a profession?
That's a great question. I will say I think part of my interest in like social services and helping other people stemmed back in high school. We had to do like those dumb career surveys that, you know, a lot of people, it tells them they're going to become an actress or something like that.
You're going to go to the moon one day.
Mine, I think I actually got social worker or like a pastor or something kind of in that profession. And so it got me thinking more about that. And I actually entered my undergrad knowing that I wanted to major in that, with the mindset like, hey, if I get into it and realize it's really not right for me, then I can always change my mind. I love social work because it focuses more on person in environment, and how we can change systems on bigger scales to try to make people healthier and happier, and also from the kind of smaller level counseling and helping people develop skills.
Does exercise play a role in that?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, for me, personally, I've seen the way that it can just help me balance my day. When I'm feeling anxious, I find that I finish a run and usually that anxiety goes away.
Is that a chemical response?
I think so. Social workers, we aren't necessarily known for like getting too much into the biology stuff, but definitely, having those hormones change a little bit through running, as well as actually like our body's trauma response, kind of goes back to the caveman days of, running is a way to survive. So, something about that movement actually can stimulate some safety in your mind.
Cool. So does what you do professionally manifest in how you approach later stages of a race? Like, are you using practices that you use with your patients on yourself, at mile 75?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely things like positive self-talk, even like in races, saying things out loud. Because some of that cognitive restructuring of, okay, yes, that's a negative thought. That doesn't mean that all of your thoughts need to be negative or that you're having a bad race.
So I read a book called Mind Gym, and one of the takeaways from that was you can only think one thing at a time. So make it positive. And if you're thinking negative things could happen. If you're thinking positive things can happen.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking about at the later stages of a race?
A lot of times my mind goes to numbers. I think that
Like math problems?
Yeah. Like sometimes, honestly, it's like just trying to focus on something that's outside of like the emotional response.
So is it calculating paces and splits, or is it like distraction?
Both. Usually if I start to focus on the pace, sometimes that can turn more toward negative thoughts.
Yep.
But if it's things like, okay, let's just get through the next quarter mile or 2 minutes, just that like breaking things into more tangible goals, something that's totally separate from something that's value-based.
Cool. So let's pretend it's Saturday at 3:15 p.m. What does success look like for you?
Finishing, feeling good, not being more injured. I have a little kind of thing going on with my hip right now, so biggest goal is not making that worse. And hopefully cheering on those around me. I'd love, like, just finishing, honestly, is going to be a huge accomplishment.
So I think it's fascinating that you didn't put a time associated with that. And I think that that's a missed opportunity for a lot of amateurs, that it's all about the time and not about the outcome or the experience, or it's about the outcome, not the experience. And so I have a lot of pro and elite athletes on this podcast, and that's a very consistent theme across the board, that people are just not focused on times at the elite level of marathoning. Obviously with trail running, it's a little different. Like it's even less valuable to look at times, but they're not talking about places. They're not talking about winning. They're talking about getting the best out of themselves. And so I think it's a good reminder for us as amateurs that this is what the pros are doing, and they're incentivized to win, and they're incentivized to PR, and you're still not putting all of the meaning onto a time or a place. I had a conversation with Ben Rosario, who's the coach of Northern Arizona Elite, and he was talking about when he was talking about New York City Marathon with a few of his athletes, and he was saying, we didn't talk about time at all in the pre-race meeting. We talked about execution and having a good day and giving it all you have, essentially. And that when you cross the line, you know that like that's what you had on that day and you gave it all. He's like, the results will happen if you do something like that. And I think it's fascinating that, like, again, you're just continuing to reaffirm that, like, that's what works.
Yeah. When I got my qualifier at CIM in 2018, I really didn't nail that many workouts, hitting the paces that I was supposed to. And yet I still ran 2 minutes under the qualifier. And I mean, my coach was like, we talked the night before. He's like, just, you probably got like a 250 in you. Just go and run and don't look at your watch. And I didn't look at my watch, and I kept up with the pace group and actually broke away.
That's awesome.
Bit. So I think there is something to be said for just listening to your body, and you're going to get the most out of it if you push yourself the most it can go at any given moment, whether that's the pace you want or not.
Definitely. I ran the Providence Marathon this past spring, or last spring, and I've been trying to break 3 for 4 years, and it took getting to the start line, not caring about the outcome on the watch, to finally do it. And it totally removed the pressure of hitting splits and hitting times and this and that, from the race buildup and the anticipation of the buildup to like just hitting flow and hitting like 640s that just felt magical. And I'd never had that experience, but I'd also never entered a race with that attitude. And I think that a good coach can facilitate that in an athlete that's open to receiving that? So you're a coach too. What's that experience like, helping other people achieve their goals?
Yeah, it's sometimes challenging. Basically, like you just said, I'll get people who want to be coached and they want to improve. And they are very much like time mindset based.
Yeah. So how do you reshift that?
So a lot of efforts, like workouts based on effort, rather than time, and, you know, really emphasizing like what certain efforts should feel like, with breathing, with basically like, that's what I use. I don't go off heart rate a lot.
Yeah.
I think that breath rate and like perceived fatigue and effort is a great way to structure workouts. So that's a big component. And then also giving like ranges, giving athletes not a lot, but a good amount of personal choice in their training. So, you know, taking off days as needed, or sometimes giving huge ranges of like, run 60 to 90 minutes today. Like if you're getting 4 extra miles because you feel good, like that's fine. And we'll rein it in when we need to.
I think that's fascinating. And then, so my coach, so David does this too. And sometimes it's like 4 to 5 miles or 60 to 80 minutes or something like that. And then sometimes I find myself like reading into, did I choose the high end or the low end? And then letting that dictate the next day when I have an option. Like, did I want to run long or did I want to cut it short? I think that's a pretty telling indicator versus looking at splits for sure.
Yeah.
So, do you have athletes running this weekend?
I don't.
Cool.
No.
So
I have an athlete who's coming to cheer me on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because he lives in Kentucky, so it's
cool.
a kind of short drive. And I've been coaching him for 3 years. We've never met.
Oh, that's
so it's
awesome.
Like, kind of like a blind date, but I'm excited.
Will you see him before the race?
You know, I think he's trying not to like bug me, which he wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can meet up today.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you run for Brooks, and you're a professional athlete, and I think a lot of people enjoy the sort of hearing how it works as a sponsored athlete. So what was that experience like, connecting with the shoe and apparel brand?
Difficult. I'll say like probably the time when athletes need the most support financially is when it's really hard to get it, being like a kind of budding athlete. So post-collegiately, there were definitely a few years where I was like kind of budgeting pretty hard to get to major races and try to get that high level experience, especially with trail races. It's a little harder to get to the higher competition ones.
I'm talking about Europe and things like that.
Europe,
or just mountain,
or even like
mountains,
some of the golden ticket races, you know, are at different parts of the country. So depending on how your race schedule matches up, you might be flying halfway across the country to get to like Bandera or down to California or, So, and I just have been kind of blessed at slowly growing like my network. That's kind of been how a lot of my opportunities have come to fruition. Just like how you kind of reached out to me through GU and some other mutual acquaintances. I mean, that's just building those connections with people have been really valuable.
Definitely. So you mentioned another one of your sponsors, GU Energy.
Yep.
Their slogan is "Eating is Training." How do you use nutrition to facilitate the work that you're asking of your body?
Well, I will say I don't eat like a ton of GU products because I really save those for racing and long runs primarily. Lots of whole foods. That's number one. Sometimes lots of junk food too. I'll say like this week is eating disorder week. I haven't like personally ever experienced that, but knowing a lot of people who have, I think that we don't talk enough about like when you're training really hard and you're craving just like a burger, that's what your body needs. So, you know,
you have these cravings for a reason.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's a deficiency.
Yeah. And those shouldn't be saved for like after a race or after a workout. It's like, hey, you did an easy run and you're really wanting like that pub burger and fries, like good.
Go for it.
Go get it. This is a recovery day.
Yeah.
So definitely like listening to cravings. And then during races, like using the goos, using the liquid nutrition of Roctane. And then I love Stroop waffles right before running too.
We'll have some at our cheer station on Saturday. You can drop by for a bit.
Okay, good.
So what's after you cross the finish line? What do you do next?
Probably the burger and a beer.
Nice. What kind of beer? Any beer?
I just love like a West Coast IPA.
Yeah.
It's like the basic, version of
cool
beer for an Oregonian.
So what does recovery look like post marathon?
I'll probably take up to a week completely off. It all just kind of depends on how beat up my legs are. Factoring in like my experience, a marathon isn't really like that long on my legs.
Even at marathon effort?
Well, it will be. So just kind of playing by feel how my body is after pounding on concrete for 26 miles. And then I'll really probably ramp up training for Western States April.
Cool.
Yeah, so probably take like a good solid 3 to 4 weeks of pretty unstructured training. Mm-hmm. Probably doing efforts, workout by effort, and then ramp it up in April for the last 3 months up to Western States.
Cool. And this will be your second time running Western States?
Third.
Mm-hmm. What's that experience like? I've been out there a couple times and it's just it's so magical. But what's it like being in the race?
It's still magical.
Probably even more magical.
Yeah. People really love the high country of that race because you are more in the mountains for the first 28 miles. Historically, that's been when I really feel the worst because you are at altitude. And so for me, the race really starts at mile 45 or 50. And the past 2 years have been pretty different too. 2018 was really hot. So there were a lot of people who dropped out or dropped back because of the heat that I was able to catch. And then in 2019, it was really a cool record-breaking year. And so on the flip side, I was catching people who just went out way too fast, kind of trying to capitalize on those conditions. So
cool. Let's fast forward 10 years. What have you done that you're really proud of?
I'll be licensed as a clinical social worker.
Awesome.
Hopefully a couple years, but I'll look back on that and be proud of that. And I hope that I can mentor others. That's something that I probably don't do enough of at this point. So I want to make that kind of a more formal part of my life in mentoring others, whether it's in the profession or through running.
What are you scared of? And I know you prepared for this question.
Because when I listen to your podcast, I'm like, oh man, that's a really hard question. I don't want him waiting for 5 minutes while I...
No, I love this question because people take it's entertaining because people take it one way or another. They're either snakes or something super deep.
Yeah. And I've heard, I think as a runner, the immediate kind of thing that I think of is injuring myself past the point of repair. So going through a really serious injury or accident is terrifying to me. But even more than that, I hope that I never have a condition, whether it's mental or physical, that causes my family pain. I see a lot of families who are impacted by mental illness. And to me, I think that would be way more painful. So my fear is ever like being in a situation that causes that kind of strife for others.
So let's talk about mental health and what that means to you. What is health? What is the health part of mental health for you?
Living a balanced life. I think everything comes back to that. There's a certain level of pleasing others and pleasing yourself. When you kind of go on either side of that is when things get out of whack. And balance of activity, non-activity. So just kind of applying that to all aspects.
And what are some tips as a professional in the space that you have for people on improving their own mental health?
Definitely mindfulness. Not putting any value or expectations to situations or experiences. Being open to what can come from an experience. And then on the other side of that, like still having goals and developing tools that you know are going to work for you to meet those goals. I think that sometimes it's hard to balance those two as well, like living in the moment and not having expectations, but also like having some scary, some ambitious goals for yourself and figuring out ways that you can set yourself up to reach them. So
what are some big scary goals that you have for yourself?
I signed up for TDS, which is, I think it's 135 kilometers, 90 miles, through the mountains of Italy and France this summer. It's part of the UTMB race series. 30,000 feet of climbing, could be like freezing conditions, windy, really technical. So that's scary. Like, I honestly am not sure if I'll finish.
Does that excite you?
It does. Yeah. Especially choosing like to do Western States again this year. It's almost becoming like a comfortable race. I know what to expect. I've done it a couple times. So having something else that's going to challenge me to train for, and shift my training more toward mountains is super exciting.
Why do you think Americans haven't really figured out UTMB?
We just don't have like the access to terrain, with the exception of some kind of pockets of the country.
So it's really just all about getting your climbing legs?
I think some of it.
Or descending legs?
Yeah. And also just like the comfort, like our culture, we really are kind of trained to stay on trails and stay on switchbacks. And that's really good trail etiquette. But some of these races, I mean, the only way to prepare is just like by running over rocks.
Yeah. So what will you do? Will you train specifically for it?
I will. I'm not really sure if I'll continue my race season past August. I haven't decided yet. And so I plan on using a lot of the vertical and like hiking as kind of recovery from Western States and then leading up to TDS.
What are some of the training tools that you use in Bend? I know there's some really fun, like Pilot Butte, like things like that are just gnarly climbs.
Yeah. So Pilot Butte is kind of like, it's like the ultramarathoners like track workout.
Yeah.
So it's like a mile.
You want to explain what it is?
Yeah. So it's a mile up. You have the option. There's a trail or a road that goes to the top. It gains just over 400 feet within that mile. So it's a really
nice.
That's it?
Wow.
So it's a pretty nice, like steady incline. So you can do like, I think the most I've done is 5 reps up. So you can do reps on it. And then there are some other great mountains close by once they start melting out in like June. We have Mount Bachelor, which you can hike up, and then the Three Sisters, just to name a few.
David had me do a 5x3 minute with a jog down, just hard. And that workout haunts me.
On Pilot Butte.
On Pilot Butte, yeah. And I got to the top, like perfectly at the end of it. And I was just like, I looked down. I was like, oh my God, that was like the hardest workout I've ever done. But it's fun that like you have these geographies that allow you to do like very specific workouts like that.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about Bend that you love?
I love that it's a mountain town, and that you never really have to get dressed. I think that goes along with the mountain culture. Yeah. We joke that like a Bend uniform is like jeans and a Patagonia puffy, because that is what most people wear. And something when I first moved there, I was like just taken aback that you literally like just go to your spots and you run into people,
Yeah.
Like even though it's kind of growing quite a bit, there still is that small town feel, and it's easy to kind of find your pocket of people.
Yeah, it was fun. I went to there's like a poke shop in town, and I ran into Ian Sharman and Steph Howe. Like,
yeah,
of course I did. Yeah, it's a super fun little town. When I was there, people were joking that they knew it was getting crowded because they had to wait for a second car in the rotary.
Yep.
So that's when you know it's getting busy. What are some races that you haven't done yet that you want to do?
Oh, that's a good question. I think just like, well, this past year I was toying with doing JFK 50.
Nice.
And it just like didn't quite work out with my schedule. So that's one that I'd love to do, just how historic it is. I used to live in DC for a couple years.
And now that weekend is a little more open.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with North Face.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to do that one. Kind of challenge again with just like being flatter and almost more of a road race in some ways. And then training for this marathon on the road has really like kind of inspired me a little bit of like, maybe I should do more road marathons.
Yeah.
So I'd love to do some of the bigger ones, like whether that's New York or Boston, just to kind of reconnect with like where ultra running stemmed from.
Yeah. I'll take this opportunity to plug Boston. It's super fun. I've run it twice and it's incredible. I mean, New York is great, but I'm from Boston, so I'm going to vote for that one.
All right.
What do you wish people knew about you? I want somebody to be like, I have 6 toes.
I know. I'm trying to think like of fun facts, I want people to know I was a really weird kid. Like I was super whiny. I think all of my siblings can attest to that. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and then I have a half brother who's now the youngest. So I want people to know like the whiny kid, the weird kid can also be like, grow up to be pretty good.
The cool kid.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm cool, but like you can grow up to do like pretty cool things.
Awesome. If we see you out racing, what should we shout?
Go Meals on Wheels.
Go Meals on Wheels. Awesome. Where can we find you on social media?
At Camelia Mayfield for both Instagram and I don't use Twitter, but you could maybe if people start like actually tweeting me or something, like maybe I'll go on it.
You get millions after this podcast.
Okay, good to know. I mean, yeah. And then I think I have a same with Facebook, but I don't really enjoy Facebook. So Instagram's the best.
Cool. Yeah, Instagram's where it's at. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining today, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you.
Go Meals on Wheels. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.